Blade Runner was not a movie that demanded a sequel. It ended with the line between human and replicant completely destroyed. Roy met Deckard in battle, but ultimately chose empathy, saving his enemy, and Deckard himself went on to spare Rachel, the replicant he loves. You might have been left with a lingering question: is Deckard really human, or is he a replicant? But this question only called further attention to the deeper questions. Does it really matter? And what does it actually mean to be human? Not in a biological sense, but in the sense that Philip K. Dick thought of it when he wrote Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the book which was adapted into Blade Runner. To him, many humans fell short of being human and were instead androids, or replicants, the term used in the movie. As long as this is still a risk, that some will lose their humanity by losing their empathy and instead becoming a tool or weapon, the deeper questions beneath Blade Runner are still relevant. And so 2049 is a welcome addition. It revisits some of the same answers, reinforcing them with a new story, while also exploring these questions further. And from a purely aesthetic standpoint, it lets us revisit a visually alluring world, rendered anew with today's technology. Let's start with the big one. What does it mean to be human? The original Blade Runner made it clear with its opening text that replicants are, for all intents and purposes, identical to humans. It describes them as virtually identical to a human, and it says the Nexus 6 models are at least equal in intelligence to the genetic engineers who created them. When it describes the killing of replicants, it says this was not called execution, it was called retirement. The implication being that it should be called execution. When replicants are killed, we should feel the same as when humans are killed. 2049 starts similarly and even goes a step further by actually calling them human, while pointing out the main difference between them, how they're made. It describes them as bioengineered humans. In no uncertain terms, they are human, but they're made, not born. And in the movie, there is great importance placed on this fact. Kay, this movie's Blade Runner, is a replicant, and early in the film, he discovers Rachel's remains. Shockingly, she died during childbirth. Kay's superior orders him to erase any evidence of this, including the child itself. For the first time, he hesitates to follow orders.
I've never retired something that was born before.
What's the difference?
To be born is to have a soul, I guess.
Are you telling me no?
I wasn't aware that was an option, madam.
Attaboy.
Later, when Kay comes to suspect he himself might be the child, it means that he might be special. As his AI girlfriend says,
I always knew you were special. Maybe this is how. A child of woman born, pushed into the world, wanted, loved.
Is it true? If a human is bioengineered rather than born, do they not have a soul? Of course, this movie doesn't directly grapple with the theological question, but while there are many views of the soul across religious and spiritual beliefs, one common and important feature is free will. And from a secular view, when the term is used metaphorically, the soul often refers to the expression of free will and sentience, the special things which differentiate us from machines, and say we are to be treated as people, not pets or slaves. And do replicants have free will? Of course they do. The Nexus 6 models rebelled in the original, expressing their will by disobeying orders and even killing their creator. Rachel, the experimental Nexus 7 model with implanted memories, runs off with Deckard. And the Nexus 8 models with natural lifespans rebelled too, culminating in the blackout of 2022. By detonating a nuclear warhead above Los Angeles, they released an EMP that, coupled with the destruction of Tyrell's servers, erased most data on replicants. As a result, the Nexus 8s have been able to live out their lives in hiding, no longer under the rule of other people. And how about the Nexus 9s created by Wallace, the breed Kay belongs to? The opening text tells us that they obey, and Denis Villeneuve, the film's director, commissioned a few short films to tell the story of what happened between movies. After a series of violent uprisings, production of Replicants was banned. But after Tyrell Corp went bankrupt, a new industrialist rose named Neander Wallace. His synthetic farming tech averted famine in the face of collapsing ecosystems. This gave him leverage, and finally, he proved the unwavering obedience of Nexus 9s to have the law overturned in his favor. In the short film 2036 Nexus Dawn, Wallace has a Nexus 9 model take its own life on command, right in front of the lawmakers. It would seem he succeeded in creating soulless, autonomous creatures, perfect for slave labor, the sort he believes is required for expanding civilization into the dangerous off-world environments. But Blade Runner 2049 proves this was only an illusion. The Nexus 9s are capable of free will. Of course, we see this by the end of the movie, when Kay disobeys orders again and again, ultimately choosing his own goal to reunite Deckard with his daughter. We even see this from Love, Wallace's trusted replicant enforcer. She reveals to Joshi that replicants, even Nexus 9s, are capable of lying, even to their masters. Love arrives in search of Rachel's child, but Kay has lied to Joshi that he already found and killed it.
You're too late. It's gone. He destroyed it. Everything about it.
You're so sure. Because he told you. Because we never lie. I'm gonna tell Mr. Wallace you tried to shoot me first. That's why I had to kill you.
And before even this, early in the movie, we see proof that replicant free will is recognized as a risk. Otherwise, the baseline test would be pointless. After returning from his mission, dispatching a rogue Nexus 8 named Sapper, Kay is administered the test. He has read a series of phrases and asked to repeat certain words from them. Many of the phrases are excerpts from the poem Pale Fire, where the author describes a near-death experience.
And dreadfully distinct.
And dreadfully distinct.
Against the dark.
Against the dark.
A tall white fountain played.
A tall white fountain played.
And dreadfully distinct against the dark, a tall white fountain played. To an android, this is simply a description of a fountain in the dark, using a few more words than necessary. To a human, it might become more than that. Those extra words evoke emotions, and in the full context of the poem, perhaps contemplation of the afterlife, something irrelevant to the soulless. Kay later fails the baseline test when he displays unacceptable emotional responses to the text. Once he comes to believe that he was born, not made, the text takes on new meaning for him. The very need for a baseline test is an admission that Nexus 9s are imperfect, in that they may develop emotions, and that's only a concern if it means it could lead to disobedience. The test exists as a safety net, so they can be caught as soon as those emotions manifest, and they can be stopped before they act out. The baseline test is an admission that Nexus 9s do, in fact, have free will, though it's greatly subdued when they're born. The poem, by the way, is part of a novel also called Pale Fire. The novel concerns two fictional characters, a poet named John Shade, the author of the poem featured in the baseline test, and his self-appointed editor, Charles Kinbote. The book is written from Charles' perspective after John's death. He shares the poem and offers commentary on it, but as the book progresses, it becomes clear that Charles is not a reliable narrator. He interprets the poem in a way that makes it largely about himself, in a self-centered and sometimes delusional manner. Whether intentional or not, this nicely parallels Kay's story. He discovers the story of a replicant who was born, and like Charles, he mistakenly inserts himself into it, only to later learn Deckard and Rachel had a daughter, not a son. Do replicants have souls? In secular terms, do they have the self-awareness, emotions, and free will which make one a person rather than a machine? In the world of Blade Runner 2049, the answer is unequivocally yes. This is not only the logical truth of the movie, but also the emotional truth, as we are asked to sympathize with the plight of a replicant, Kay. If replicants are virtually identical to humans, what makes them second-class citizens? As in the original, the answer is the label itself. They and the rest of the world are told, replicants are not human. They are to be used as tools for humanity's own ends. Kay's superior essentially admits it's all a carefully guarded illusion. This is her phrasing when she tells Kay to erase all evidence of a replicant who gave birth.
The world is built on a wall that separates kind. Tell either side there's no wall, you bought a war. Or a slaughter. So what you saw didn't happen.
She knows that the wall is a societal construct that can be broken, though for Kay, it still exists. Dave Bautista's character Sapper says as much in the opening sequence. As a Nexus 8, he has been living in hiding and was part of the rebellion. Here's what he thinks of Nexus 9s, the line Kay belongs to.
You new models are happy scraping the shit because you've never seen a miracle.
Replicant slavery might seem like a knowledge problem. Kay just has to learn that he's human and then he'll rebel like his predecessors. But Sapper does not say that Kay needs to learn the truth. He says that he needs to see a miracle. Morality is something so deeply entrenched, it's more powerful than logic. You could show Kay an X-ray and DNA analysis to prove that humans and replicants, down to their bone marrow, are virtually identical. It likely wouldn't change his feelings, because those come from the implicit values and beliefs coded by life experience. If you are told from your first moments of awareness that you are a replicant, that you are unworthy of personhood, and you are consistently treated as such, that will be your emotional reality, regardless of facts. To change that takes more than reasoning and science. It takes a miracle. It means seeing the impossible with your own eyes. Evidence of a pregnant replicant from almost 30 years ago wasn't enough for Kay. He wasn't visibly moved until he saw something impossible with his own eyes. Kay, like all replicants, was created with implanted memories to keep him stable. He was told that all those memories are constructed. After all, it's illegal to use real memories. He shares one of them with Joshi, the one where he hides a toy horse from some bullies at the orphanage. Etched into that horse was a date, and revisiting Sapper's home, he finds the same date etched into the tree at Rachel's burial site. When he visits Dr. Anna Stelline, the one who constructs replicant memories, and confirms the memory is real, we see Kay's most human moment yet. And he subsequently fails his baseline test. To shake people from their reverie, it takes a miracle, something that will move them. That's why Rachel's child is so important to the rebellion. Their leader, Fraser, recognizes this, telling Kay about the child. When the time comes, I will show her to the world, and she will lead our army. She knows that some scans showing that a replicant gave birth might put a few cracks in the wall, but it won't eradicate it. To move people at their core and make them believe replicants are human, they need to see her, the replicant child of woman born. It should be noted that this entire line of reasoning is irrational. It's predicated on the assumption that replicants are only human if they can reproduce. But that's the belief instilled in them and society. Poking a hole in that narrative with a living, breathing soul will be far more effective than a philosophical dissertation on what makes someone human, as opposed to a machine or tool. The child will move people on an emotional level, the level where morals and values are forged. Aside from the replicants' internalized idea that they are inferior, Blade Runner 2049 explores a few other ways they are kept in their place without direct force. Wallace's own replicant enforcer, Love, shows a degree of free will, but ultimately serves him. Why? There are several instances where she shows a sort of Stockholm syndrome. She needs to please Wallace, and intensely fears letting him down. In one scene, Wallace makes his disappointment known. He wants to unlock the secret which died with Tyrell, replicant reproduction. Thus far, all their experiments have failed. As he discusses that failure, Love sheds a tear. And that's before he callously kills a fresh Nexus 9 in front of her, just to express his disappointment. Why does she cry? The screenplay describes it like this. On love, an eye waters at the thought of disappointing him. On the other hand, she wants deeply to please him. During their final struggle, when she thinks she's killed Kay, she reassures herself what this victory means.
I'm the best one.
She wants to be the best replicant, a desire stoked by Wallace.
The best angel of all. Aren't you, love?
She so wants Wallace to see her as more than the others. She's adopted a name which isn't really a name at all. The screenplay actually includes a line that was removed in the final edit, which makes this explicit. In the scene where Wallace slaughters his latest model, he first takes a look at her. Since he's blind, he does this through floating cameras, whose images he receives through a device implanted behind his ear. In the scene that was shot, Love knows which receiver to place intuitively, but in the script, Wallace specifically asks for it. Bring the one for my chronics, would you, love? And the screenplay continues. Ah, love, a diminutive, not a name at all, though taken for one. Watch her poker face when Kay notes this.
He named you. Must be special.
I'm here for Mr. Wallace.
Love is instilled with a fear of disappointing Wallace and an intense desire to please him. The Wallace Corporation has other ways of preventing rebellion too, placating replicants by keeping them comfortable. Just watch Kay when he returns from retiring sapper. He takes slings, arrows, and slurs from all his neighbors on the way upstairs. But he can withstand it all because waiting for him back home is his AI girlfriend, aptly named Joy. She is a product sold by the Wallace Corporation, and she would be so happy if you bought her an Emanator so she could travel with you. Note, Emanator sold separately. Look no further for the future of in-app purchases. Does Joy make Kay happy? It'd be more accurate to say she makes him comfortable, but the movie ensures their relationship is constantly undercut by a key fact. Joy is a mass-produced simulation, programmed to be whatever you want.
Joy is anything you want her to be. Joy goes anywhere you want her to go.
And to tell you whatever you want to hear, like you're special, maybe you were born, not created. The screenplay even emphasizes that point in this scene, describing Joy's actions. Her hand strokes his cheek, a whisper in his ear, seductive, close, then italicized for emphasis, everything he wants to hear. Kay and the audience are constantly reminded of what she really is, so that there's always a cloud of doubt around their relationship. When she syncs with a replicant to simulate physical sensation, the sync never quite works. Mariette is always a step ahead, making it clear there's a hologram struggling to keep up, and her face sometimes peeks through Joy's. When they become physically intimate, the camera pans to an animated billboard, verbally announcing that Joy is anything you want her to be, with text announcing that she is everything you want to hear and see. It quickly removes all the romance from their lovemaking. If free will is the expression of a soul, then Joy, programmed to be exactly what you want, would be soulless. Her lack of imperfections would place her in the uncanny valley, where you would always know she isn't quite real. Kay plays along, but sometimes sees through it.
I'm so happy when I'm with you.
You don't have to say that.
She kisses him, then freezes, interrupted by a call from Joshi, another blatant reminder that she's more like an app than a real person. Her job is to convince him otherwise. She doesn't have to do a perfect job, just enough to keep him comfortable, just enough to keep him complacent. Otherwise, he might get some ideas about improving his station. There is another avenue for exploration which this movie mostly avoids, Joy's point of view, if it even exists. At a certain point, can AI become conscious? Replicants sidestep this question because they're biological. Even if the scientists of Blade Runner haven't cracked the code of true consciousness, they can clone human biology and recreate a brain without knowledge of all its inner workings and secrets. It's safe to say replicants are just as self-aware and sentient as humans. but the same cannot be said for Joy. The movie tells us again and again that she is programming specifically designed to be whatever customers want her to be. It's unclear if she ever expresses free will by deviating from this programming. Perhaps when she tells Kay to take her off the console, so she exists only in the emanator with no backup, meaning if it breaks, this version of her is dead with no comebacks. But even in that case, if Kay wants to believe she's real, her programming would dictate she recommend this seemingly risky course of action. The original Blade Runner was intended to feel like a peek into our near future, rather than a far-flung sci-fi fantasy. The sequel achieves the same feat, because this debate over whether AI is conscious or not will likely become a reality very soon. I don't think it would be fair to call ChatGPT or any of our current language learning models self-aware. And honestly, outside of the visual and holographic tech, Joy doesn't say anything that would seem much beyond ChatGPT's reach. So it's easy to see how something like a 10 to 15% improvement on where we are today would reach a place that looks like consciousness at first glance, even if it's only an illusion. And once that illusion is achieved, relationships with AI like the one between Kay and Joy are likely to become more commonplace. As of last September, the monthly search volume for AI girlfriend was at about 49,500 hits per month, according to wordstream.com. It's easy to imagine a couple of scenarios here. On the positive side, according to a Meta Gallup survey last year, 1 in 4 adults around the world feel lonely. And loneliness can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, turning people unhappy and bitter, leading to further isolation. Could AI ease the pain while creating an off-ramp to encourage people back to more human-to-human contact? Or would it simply make people more comfortable with their current situation, leading to complacency? An AI hologram in its perfection would be unable to replace the true human touch. By being whatever you want it to be, an AI companion becomes soulless because it sticks to the programming and expresses no free will. Maybe it makes you comfortable enough that it's no longer worth reaching for a more fulfilling relationship that comes with imperfections and risk of rejection. Instead, you settle for something that feels nice, but never quite real. Maybe we will have to ask ourselves at a certain point, whether intentional or not, if AI has become conscious. A question more directly addressed in other stories. Blade Runner 2049 instead seems to focus on the danger to users, falling under the spell of an illusion. Near the climax of the movie, Deckard and Kay both reject illusion. The former is offered a recreation of Rachel, complete with implanted memories to make her indistinguishable from the woman he loved, the one who died about 3 decades ago. It's an offer for Deckard to tell Wallace everything he knows about his child, so the industrialist can get his hands on her, dissect her, and unlock the secret which would allow his products to reproduce faster than he could build them. Something he might have to keep secret to avoid destroying that wall Joshi talked about. But Deckard rejects what the screenplay calls a simulacrum.
Her eyes were green.
Her eyes were green. He could overlook the details, but Blade Runner 2049 says that reality matters. Deckard knows that it might be nice to accept this new Rachel, but he also knows that it would be an illusion, never entirely convincing. Then Wallace has Love callously shoot her. A tragedy. Although she wasn't Rachel, she was a human being, just as human as her Nexus 7 predecessor, just as human as Deckard. Why doesn't she fight back? Why didn't the earlier model that Wallace killed fight back? Perhaps as newborns, taught only that they are less than human, the will to fight for self-preservation is something that takes time to develop. The very next scene has Kay contemplating what to do next. He was captured by the Resistance Nexus 8s and told to kill Deckard to keep his child safe, ensuring Wallace never learns whatever he knows. Just like Deckard, Kay faces a new version of his past love and sees through the illusion. A giant holographic advertisement for Joy looks at him and says soothingly, "What a day. You look lonely. I can fix that. You look like a good Joe." That's the line which cuts through him. Earlier, the Joy he knew deemed Kay too important to live without a name, so she called him Joe. But now he sees that affection was likely just another line of her code, a pet name so commonly used it's featured in the advertising. In this scene, he silently says goodbye to this generic joy that can't replace the one he knew, or perhaps to the idea of her entirely, the idea that she was ever real. Both characters in these scenes emphasize the importance of reality. Coincidentally, one of my recent videos in this series covered Inception, which spends most of its runtime focused on this exact theme. In a speech he gave years after the movie's release, Christopher Nolan summed up its message with 2 words: reality matters. I think those words are just as relevant here, in particular for these 2 scenes. But throughout the movie, we see a longing for reality. Some of the most important moments center on the question of whether or not Kay's memory is real. Characters repeatedly hold out their hand to catch rain or snow, as if looking for proof of their presence in the real world. Joy tries it the first time the emanator allows her to step outside. The rain falls through her hand until the hologram detects rain and updates to reflect it. After Kay learns that his memory of the toy horse is real, he steps outside to find it snowing, then holds out his hand, and sure enough, he's real. The snow does not pass through him. He'll do the same thing again at the end of the movie, after reuniting Deckard with his daughter. At the same time, Anna holds out her hand to catch holographic snow, but while she's real, the snow isn't. The illusion just doesn't cut it. After Joshi asks Kay to share a memory, and he tells her about fighting for the toy horse, she responds,
Little Kay fighting for what's his. It's a good one. Look at me. We're all just looking out for something real.
In the same scene where Wallace offers Deckard a new Rachel, he insinuates that Deckard is a replicant. He starts by mentioning how quickly and easily he fell in love with her, then goes on.
How shiny her lips. How instant your connection. Did it never occur to you that's why you were summoned in the first place? Designed to do nothing short of fall for her right then and there. All to make that single, perfect specimen.
Then he pulls back to keep the answer ambiguous.
That is, if you were designed love or mathematical precision.
He's toying with Deckard, confusing him, telling him he doesn't know what's real or not. But Deckard is unfazed.
I know what's real.
And it matters what's real. Once you've made the determination of what's real, and you've decided to live in reality, what next? Blade Runner 2049 explores some similar themes as the original while expanding a few areas. It begins with the same premise, that replicants are human but treated otherwise, then further explores why they're treated as less, how they're kept pacified, and what it takes to wake them up. It also grapples more with the idea of objective reality, what it means, and whether or not it matters. But in the end, it starts to coincide with an idea that was also central to the original: empathy. Going back to Philip K. Dick's conception of the metaphorical android versus human, he believed that people could be, quote, physiologically human, but behaving in a non-human way. He discovered the idea while researching Nazi behavior for his book, The Man in the High Castle. Deckard and Kay, one a replicant and the other maybe a replicant, are nonetheless physiologically human, but they begin their stories behaving in a non-human way. What makes a machine different from a person? A machine is a tool or instrument. It doesn't care if it's turned on or off. It doesn't have its own goals or desires. Instead, it's used for someone else's purposes. And it doesn't have empathy. If someone shoots an innocent person, the gun has no feelings on the matter one way or another. Some replicants, too young to have fully developed their feelings, fail the first test. In the short film, Wallace orders one to take his own life, and he does so without complaint. The replicants of the original film, on the other hand, spend the entire film fighting precisely for more life. And do they pursue their own goals or someone else's? Deckard fails this test for most of the original movie. Like a machine, he is simply the weapon wielded by the bureaucracy to retire rogue replicants. Kay begins his own story in the same place. In the end, Roy Batty takes the final step in claiming humanity. After fighting for his own life and pursuing his own goals, he uses his last breaths to save Deckard's life. Empathy. Deckard himself comes to see humanity in the replicants and finally pursues his own destiny by going on the run with Rachel. Roy, Deckard, and Rachel, in the end, all earn the label human by Philip K. Dick's standards. And how about Kay? He spends most of the movie as a tool for others. At first, Joshi, and eventually the Nexus 8 Rebellion tries to do the same. Only minutes after meeting them, Freyza gives him a disturbing order: kill Deckard. Up to this point, Kay does disobey some orders, but primarily as a means of self-preservation. He suspects that he's Deckard's child, which would put a big target on his back.
If it were true, I'd be hunted for the rest of my life by someone just like me.
So he investigates quietly, lies to Joshi, and keeps his suspicions to himself. Self-preservation, one step toward claiming humanity. But he still needs to operate by his own will to achieve his own goals. And after meeting Freyza, he does. There's the moment of self-reflection, hearing the Joy advertisement calling him a good Joe. Then he finds Deckard, but not to kill him. Only then does he finally make a real choice, and it's rooted in empathy. He decides to risk his life and limb to reunite Deckard with his daughter, whom he pieces together is Dr. Anna Stelline. And ultimately, it does cost him his life, but he seems to die with a sense of accomplishment. Why? As Deckard asks,
Why? What am I to you?
The answer is that Deckard and Anna are the only people he really knows at all. Outside of Joy, Kay doesn't seem to socialize with anyone except for Joshi to some degree, where the power dynamic makes it a one-sided relationship. But he shares at least one memory with Anna to know where she comes from. He pieces together the love story between Deckard and Rachel, and even comes to know him to some extent. When we learn someone's story, it sets off our empathy. When we watch a movie, that's why we hope for characters to succeed. And when they do, we feel to some extent that we have too. For Kay, their story is the only real story he knows. Sure, he's offered a role in another. He can be a tool for Freyza's rebellion, and then she can use Anna as well to be their figurehead as a way to give hope to replicants, proving they are more human than human. Maybe that would even be for the best in the end, but Kay doesn't really know them, and killing Deckard doesn't feel right either. But when it comes to the story of Deckard and Anna, a man living in solitude and regret, a girl living isolated behind glass without a family, that's a story where Kay has the power to bring the narrative to a happy ending. It is the very definition of empathy. Kay chooses to act after walking a mile in Anna's shoes, literally feeling as though he's lived some of her life's experiences. Kay's choice echoes Roy Batty's decades earlier, saving Deckard with his last act, not from death in this case, but from solitude and regret. In the end, Blade Runner 2049, like its predecessor, is in part a glimpse at a potential future and a warning about how things can go wrong. But also like its predecessor, its primary concern is using its dystopian future to explore themes that are relevant today. Anytime you're told to look at your country's enemies as less than human, for example, you're subject to the same tactics used in Neander Wallace's world to turn replicants into slaves. When you spend hours scrolling through social media on your phone instead of pursuing the grander dreams you've left to decay because you'll get to them later, you've fallen into complacency, like Kay occupying himself with an app called Joy. And when you are told that the truth can be bent or twisted, or that maybe there is no truth at all, remember, her eyes were green. I think we can wrap it up there. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. With that, thank you for watching, and see you on the next One Take.